Modification for maximum street or drag strip performance is a pretty large topic to discuss. There are a lot of things you can do to a performance car without even getting into the heads or block. But before we get into that, Mr. Scott mentioned warranty, and I mentioned drag strip, so let's clear that up right now. You better tell your customers just like it is. For all practical purposes, racing or participation in other competitive speed events voids the warranty. When it comes to modifications, unauthorized alterations or use of parts or material not approved by Chrysler Corporation will also void the warranty. But that doesn't mean there aren't plenty of authorized adjustments and approved parts goodies available for the customer that want some customized performance service. So let's get back to the performance bag. If they haven't been done before, all of the procedures for super tuning must be done along with the strip modifications. Just like any hard-playing athlete needs his Wheaties, a performance engine must be fed right if it's going to run hard. Let's take a look at fuel induction and see what can be done to improve it. On performance cars, flooding and vapor lock can be prevented by installing the correct fuel pressure regulator in the fuel delivery system. If the car doesn't already have one, installing an unsilenced air cleaner will improve the breathing. The other alternative is to install a hot rod or bonnet type air cleaner approved by Chrysler. But remember, the extra air coming in is going to affect the air-fuel mixture. Always reset the idle speed and fuel mixture after installing a different air cleaner. If you want to modify the stock system, several intake manifold and carburetor combinations are readily available that can increase performance, depending on which system the particular engine is equipped with. Let's see what's available. For best results over the entire RPM range, use the Edelbrock single quad high-rise manifold. For the 340 engines, use a Holley 700 CFM carburetor. For the other engines, use the Holley 780 CFM carb. If a 440 is equipped with a Carter AVS, increased performance is easily obtained by changing to a Carter AFB or Holley 850 CFM job for engine speeds up to 5,000 RPM. For best performance above the 4,000 RPM range, use the factory dual quad intake mounting with the Carter AFB carburetors. If you use the dual quad setup, bake-like spacers should be used between the carburetors and manifold to eliminate heat buildup in the float bowls. If the spacers are not available, use a stack of 5 or 6 carburetor mounting gaskets. That takes care of the fuel department. The next thing is to make sure you have the spark to ignite the fuel charge. If the car is to be used primarily for drag racing, install the super stock transistorized ignition. If you use the transistorized ignition, you should install the Hemi super stock points also. Now these points are shorter, lighter, and will run at much higher speeds without encountering point bounce. But be careful, these points are designed for the transistorized ignition. They must not be used with the standard ignition system. For street use with the transistorized ignition, the standard recommended plug should be used. But if you plan on extensive high RPM operation or drag racing, you should use plugs that are 1 or 2 steps colder. There's a few more things you can do under the hood to improve performance. The stock cooling system is adequate to keep operating temperatures to accepted levels. However, some components can be changed to reduce power losses in the system. The torque control drive fan can be installed in place of the stock fan. You should also replace the water pump impeller with the one used with air conditioning. This impeller has a smaller diameter and offers less resistance. To really keep cool, a maximum cooling high-performance radiator and 7-blade torque drive fan can be installed if the car is not so equipped. That's about all we have time to cover on super tuning and competition modification. Incidentally, there's one setup that you should be on the lookout for. You may not have seen any yet, but they're selling like hotcakes, and it won't be too long before you see one in for service. I'm talking about the 3 two-barrel setup available on the 440 engines. The service manuals were printed long before the 3 two-barrels were available, so they won't have any service procedures for the Holley two-barrels. A service bulletin has been issued on the system, but let's review it just the same. Now, here's how it works. The 2 end carburetors don't have the usual choke, power enrichment, idle, and spark advance systems. Each carburetor is equipped with a throttle control vacuum diaphragm. This diaphragm is the same as on the 4 barrels and requires no service. The two end carburetors are connected to the center carburetor's slotted throttle lever by 2 adjustable connector rods. The slotted throttle lever of the center carb allows the throttle valves to open on the end carburetors as vacuum requires and close mechanically with the controlling center carburetor. Basically, the center carb on the 3 2-barrel system is the same as the primary side of the 4-barrel carburetor. The end carburetors are the same as the secondary portion of the 4 barrels, so don't let them throw you when you have to service them. The basic adjustments are the same with the exception of the specifications. Check the service bulletin when making any adjustment. The end throttle valves must be synchronized with the center throttle valve. This is another adjustment that may be a little strange to you. I'm going to run through it, although you may have studied your bulletin carefully. It's done this way. If the adjustment is to be done on the vehicle, be sure the ignition switch is off. This de-energizes the fast idle solenoid so that clearance is obtained between the plunger and fast idle adjusting screw. Remove the air cleaner, then remove the end carburetor throttle connector rod clips and disengage the front and rear rods from the throttle levers. Close the throttle valves on all 3 carbs and hold in the closed position. Shorten or lengthen the front and rear connector rods by turning in or out in the threaded sleeve. Adjust until the rod can enter the hole in the throttle lever evenly. After installing the throttle connector rod and the end carburetor throttle levers, secure with spring clips. Readjust idle speed to 900 RPM for automatics and 1000 RPM for manual transmissions. Checking the wet fuel level on the Holly 2-barrel is slightly different than the 4-barrel. Before checking the wet fuel level, check the fuel pump pressure to be certain that a 5-pound reading is obtained. Start the engine and remove the sight plug from each carburetor. Using a wrench and screwdriver, turn the adjusting nut either up or down until fuel just dribbles out of the sight hole. Reinstall the sight plugs and gaskets and tighten securely.
Let me suggest something at this point. It's a good idea to place a container under the bowl before removing plugs to catch any fuel that might run out due to a high or improper previous setting.
Here's a final reminder. If you're reassembling or installing a new part, make sure that the parts have been thoroughly cleaned and are kept as clean as possible while you're installing them. Another thing, observe all factory torque specs for all fasteners and also follow the factory tightening sequence if there is one. Well, that's about it. I hope that this little get-together has been informative to all of you. I know there's a lot we didn't cover, but maybe sometime in the future we'll pick up and cover some of the internal and driveline modifications. And remember, our factory service rep has been very helpful to us with any performance questions we've come up with. If you have any questions right now, I'll try to answer as many as I can. Why don't we have a coffee break first, and then we'll...
Well, guys, that's how Scott Motors is handling the big performance push. I found it pretty informative. Truth is, when I left, I kind of felt a little bit out of it. Guess like most people, I just wasn't aware how big performance is getting. You master technicians are also going to have to practice a little bit more customer relations with owners of performance cars. Most of them like to stand by while the work is being done rather than drink coffee in the waiting lounge. You may also have to suffer through a little extra conversation and possibly some volunteer diagnosis. But in turn, you'll have a steady customer and possibly some referrals to other performance owners. And remember, these owners have paid a premium for the performance features on their car. And all they ask is to feel a difference for the period they own the car. I see we're just about out of time, so I'll have to wrap this session up. But before I split, I'll throw in the usual reminder to read your reference book thoroughly. It contains some info we didn't have time to cover and some performance specs which will be plenty helpful. See you at the next session. You'll get the lowdown on service features for the 70s.